Hi there, in this lesson we'll learn about SQL functions, and more specifically we'll learn about what a single row function is. After that we'll learn about a special table available in the Oracle database, and that's called the dual table. So let's get started. A function is a predefined program that performs some task. For example, a function could be created to find the sum of two numbers, and when this function would be executed, it would return a single result. And the result, of course, would be the sum of two numbers added together. So functions have names, and we'll be looking at a few of them in this lesson. But let me show you an example of what a function actually looks like. Now, this is an arbitrary function that I'm making up. Here's an example of a function that would need to be created if we wanted to add arbitrary numbers like this. Right? The name of this function is called SumThese. It takes three inputs. These inputs are also referred to as arguments. The first argument is the number 5. The second argument is the number 7, and the third argument is the number 5 as well. And by the name of this function, you can probably guess what it's intended to do. It's supposed to return the result of adding three arbitrary numbers like this. Now, this function doesn't actually exist in the database yet because I haven't created it. But if I was to create it, it could be used as a program by other users of the database, and they could give their own set of three numbers and compute the sum of them. Now, we're not going to be creating any functions like this because there are already plenty of functions, plenty of handy functions that come as part of the SQL language, and we'll go over those in this lesson. And more specifically, those are referred to as single row functions. All this really means is that single row functions act on one row at a time. For every row that a function is called, it will perform whatever task it's designed to do and return a single value every time. So for example, we saw a little while ago how we could combine values of two columns together. And that was called concatenation, right? We weren't summing them together. We were just basically taking a value from column A and taking a value from column B and just munging them together, right? Into one sentence or one series of characters. And we used pipes to concatenate two values together. Well, it turns out there is a function for doing exactly that, and it's called the concat function. So let me show you an example of that first. Now, just a quick reminder, let's do a select my name is, and then we use the pipes like that. And we give the name ename column from emp, highlight that and hit run. And notice that it is combining the value of whatever is in the ename column and combining this sentence with it, right? We're using this because of this pipe. This is an operator, but we can actually use the concat function. And the way that works is we could do select concat, right? Open parentheses, and the first argument, the first input is going to be the sentence, my name is, okay? And then we close it with that quote. And then the second argument, put a comma, and the second argument is ename. And we close the parentheses, and we can do from emp. And this will do exactly the same thing as this one up here. With the operator, it's going to be doing the same exact thing. So hit run here, and notice that it's printing as expected. All right. Now, like I said, we're going to be talking about single row functions in this lesson, and this happens to be a single row function, meaning it operates on one row at a time. For every single row of the table, all of the records in the employee table are going to be applied this function called concat, and we're going to be using a particular column in each one of those records, and that's called the ename column, and we're basically concatenating this sentence with whatever value is in that column for every single record of the table. Now, notice that the column name is not very reader friendly, right? It's clubbing everything together. So we can do as, and I can say sentence or something like this. And this would be a lot easier to understand. So highlight that and hit run, and notice that the sentence is the column name here, okay? So now the next thing I want to talk about is another function. Let's do select the word upper and then open parentheses, and I can give some string. For example, I could say select upper hello, all right, from emp, and highlight this and hit run. And notice that it's basically uppercasing. It's uppercasing these sets of characters, right? This is an English word, hello, and it's uppercasing that for every single record of the table, right? This table has 14 rows. So every single one of those rows is being applied this function, right? That's the whole idea behind single row functions. For every single row, right, this function is being applied. And we're not giving it a particular column as an argument. We're giving it a constant value as an argument. And that value is the word hello. So for every single record, that word hello will be capitalized. Now, oftentimes you want to test functions out. We don't need to repeat all of this information in the output just to see, just to see what this function does. But if we take this thing and we pull it out of the select statement, and we just try to invoke it like this, just to see what this thing does, and highlight and hit run, notice that this is an invalid SQL statement. Remember, a SQL statement must have a select and a from clause at a minimum, okay? What we need at a minimum is a select statement. Okay, so select, and then this particular function call, and then we need the from. But since this is a single row function, it's going to apply this function on every single row of whatever table we pick. Okay, so I could do dept, this is the department table, and hit run, and notice that it's showing this 4 rows because there are 4 rows in the department table. So it's repeating this uppercased word 4 times. The important thing to keep in mind that whatever is in the select clause, right? It doesn't have to be at a function. It could just be, for example, just a word like this. If we highlight that and hit run, it's going to execute whatever is part of the select statement for those many records that qualify, right? In this case, we're in the department table. If I change this to emp and highlight that and hit run, this is going to repeat whatever is here that many times for all records that qualify, which is the entire, we don't have any filter conditions. If I change this to be where dept no is equal to 20, I know we have some records that have the value 20 in the department field, the department number field in the employee table, highlight this and it's going to repeat this word, hello, that many times. There's 5 rows in the employee table that contain department number 20, okay? And you can check that on your own. So whatever is in this clause, right, whatever is in the select clause is applied for every single record. That's what is meant by the single row idea, okay? Now you might be wondering if there's a better way to do this. If you wanted to test a function out, if you wanted to see, for example, what the upper function does, why do you have to see this word hello being printed multiple times? Right? In the from clause of your table, let's say if your table contained 100 records, then that word hello, capital, will be repeating 100 times. That just seems extraneous, doesn't it? There must be a better way. And guess what? There is. The cool thing is that there is a special table in Oracle called the dual table, D-U-A-L, dual. And that makes it easy for us to test functions like this. Remember, I can't just take this and run it, highlight this and hit run. It doesn't work like that. I need, at a minimum, a select statement and a from. So there is the dual table that we can use. We can do select, upper, and then we give some value, for example, hello, and then from dual. Okay, this is the table name. And I can have lowercase as well as uppercase. It doesn't really matter. It's case insensitive. Highlight this and hit run. And notice that we only get a single value, okay? Because the dual table only contains a single record, and it's used to test whatever type of functionality, right? So for example, instead of upper, I can have the word lower, like that. Highlight that and hit run, and this is another special function available to us as part of the SQL language, and that's going to lowercase whatever we give it, okay? Now this is already lowercased but I can put some uppercase stuff in here, and it's of course going to lower that. Notice that it's lowering everything that it gets as the argument. Okay, so this dual table is very handy. Now, just to show you what the dual table looks like, we could do a select star from dual, right? Just to see what this table contains. Highlight that and hit run, and notice it just has a single column called dummy, and it has this dummy value in there. So just a one record with one column. Now I can give a select statement pretty much anything. I could do select pizza like that and hit run, and it will basically give the column pizza and put the value pizza in there. And I could give the column name to be food like that. Highlight that and hit run, and it's going to name the column food and put the word pizza in there. And I could put a comma here and put something else. Let's put the word Fanta and name this record. Well, let's just highlight this and hit run just so you can see what happens. And notice we have food to be the first column, and we have pizza in there, and then Fanta to be the second column, and with the word Fanta in there. So let's rename this. Rather than it being, whatever is the value, we could do as, and I'll name it drink, like that. Highlight this and hit run, and notice that it named the column drink, and the word Fanta is there, right? So just a single row, we can create random columns with different values just to see things. And I can also use functions here, like for example, concat, and I can concat some words together. Hello, and the second argument is going to be space John. Okay, just some gibberish just to test this out. Highlight that and hit run, and you'll see how the data is changing. We have a single record, 3 columns. The first column is food, the second column is drink, and then this sentence, hello John, or whatever. And the column name for that is this function call, and I can rename this as, let's use double quotes and put a sentence in there. This is a func, like that. Highlight that and hit run, and you'll see that the data is changing accordingly. So it's a cool thing to play around with the dual table. Now let's get back to functions. I'm going to give a more comprehensive example, and you're going to get more practice. We can call functions within other functions. So for example, if I do select lower, and I do ename from emp, highlight this and hit run, notice that we get all of the names in lowercase, King, Blake, Clark, and so on. I can concatenate this with some other words. Okay, so I could do concat, okay, and the first argument of concat is going to be the value of whatever this returns, all right, comma, and then I can put some text here, is the name. Okay, so let me put a little space here, and then close the bracket for concat. Okay, so this concatenation function, the first argument is this thing right here, which happens to be another function call, and then this series of characters is the second argument for the concat function. So highlight this and hit run, and notice that it's saying King in lowercase is the name, Blake is the name, Clark is the name for every single record. All right, and just to reiterate the point that we can filter this, we can do where dept no is equal to, for example, 20. This will reduce the number of results in the output, right? So this select statement will be applied. This function, this single row function invocation will be applied on every single row, right? So we only get 5 rows returned. So let's make this even more hairy. So in here, this particular statement is the name. I can wrap this in a function as well, and I can use the upper function like that. Okay, now we have 2 functions, right, that are being invoked, the lowercase and the uppercase function. But the grander scheme of things is that both of these arguments. This is an argument, and this is an argument to the concat function. Both of these values are being passed to this concat function. Highlight this and hit run, and notice that we get is the name in capital because we're using this upper. So definitely take your time to understand how these functions work. The first part of this before the comma is the first argument, and the second part of this after the comma is the second argument, okay, to this function called concat. Now, I'll give you an assignment, and this might be challenging for those of you that are new to functions, but that's totally okay. You need the practice, and that's going to make all the difference. I want you to concatenate the value here that's being returned with the statement and their job is, and then the job name, okay? So it should return something like this. Jones is the name and their job is such and such. Scott is the name and their job is, and so on, okay? And don't change this lower invocation and upper invocation. These functions, leave them the way they are. I want you to get used to seeing functions within functions, and you're going to need to actually wrap this entire thing, this entire function call of concat in another concat, and then combine that, combine the output of this with the statement that I'm mentioning, right? The job sentence. So give this a shot and try this out. Don't give up. And then when you've given it an honest effort, you can resume to watch my solution. All right, hopefully you took a stab at that. Now, I know it may have been challenging for those of you that are not used to functions, but this is what it's all about. You need to get the practice, and hopefully this was a good chance for you to understand how functions work. Remember, these are the arguments. The first argument is this expression right here. It could be a string, it could be whatever. In this case, it's a function. And the second argument is this upper function call. And it's the grander scheme of things is both of these arguments are being passed to this function called concat. Now, I mentioned that I want you to add the sentence and their job is such and such. So we need to actually have a concat outside of this, all right? And this entire expression, this entire invocation of concat is going to be the first argument, all right? And then what we can do is combine another concat, okay? And in here, it's going to be concatenating the words and their job is with a colon, and then put the quote there. And then the second argument to this concat is going to be their job. And that's just the job column. Okay, so you can reference the column just like that. And notice that this bracket that I've entered here, this is closing off this function. Now I need to close the entire function. That's going to be one more bracket. And this guy, this little bracket here is closing off this thing. Okay, so highlight this entire thing and hit run. And notice that we are getting, well, we're getting almost what we want. Notice that there is there's no space between the second sentence that I'm adding to this, right? So let's add that space here. And it turns out that there's a space needed right before this and. So let's highlight that, see if that works. And notice that it is working as expected, okay? So this was definitely non-trivial. I expected you to struggle with this. And if this was smooth sailing for you, great job. You're moving at a fast pace. So we can give this column a name. I don't like the way this entire expression is being clubbed into the column. So let's give this, I'm just going to call it with double quotes and say function call, okay? And highlight that, hit run. And now this word function call is being put into the column, and all of the data is being shown in the records here. All right, let's move on to the next lesson. We're going to continue on this topic of functions, and then we're going to go into grouping functions. So stay tuned.